Welcome back. This is the next part of Life Before the Internet, where we learn English through a slower, simpler way of life. As the story continues, listen for real British words, natural expressions, and everyday language. Let's begin. In the winter of 2000, the small town of Willowbrook in the English countryside was wrapped in a blanket of frost. The days were short, with darkness falling by 4 in the afternoon, and the air carried the sharp bite of cold that made people hurry indoors. Life moved at a slower pace back then, without the constant buzz of emails or social media feeds. People relied on letters, phone calls, and face-to-face chats to stay connected. For many, the internet was still a novelty, something you might dial up on a clunky computer with a screeching modem if you had one at all. But in Willowbrook, most folks got by without it. Sarah Jenkins, a teacher at the local primary school, started her mornings with a cup of tea and the newspaper delivered to her doorstep. She lived in a cosy terraced house on Elm Street, where the radiators hummed softly against the chill. On this particular December day, she wrapped her scarf tightly and stepped out into the crisp air. The pavements were slippery with ice, and she waved to Mr. Thompson, the postman, who was cycling by with his red Royal Mail bag slung over his shoulder. "Morning, Sarah. Got a letter from your sister in London," he called out, his breath forming clouds in the air. "Thanks, Tom. Mind the ice. Don't want you slipping," she replied with a smile. Mr. Thompson had been delivering mail for 20 years. He knew everyone's business in a way, from birthday cards to bills. Without the quick clicks of online banking, people waited anxiously for their checks to arrive. He pedalled on, stopping at the bakery where Mrs. Patel was opening up. The smell of fresh bread wafted out, drawing in early customers. Inside the bakery, young Alex, a teenager working part-time, helped stack the shelves. At 16, he spent his free time playing football with mates or reading comics borrowed from the library. No smartphones meant no endless scrolling. Instead, he'd flip through the pages of a magazine or listen to the radio. "Mum says the internet's coming soon," he told Mrs. Patel as he arranged the loaves. "But who needs it? I'd rather chat with friends at the park." Mrs. Patel nodded, her hands dusted with flour. She had moved to England from India in the 1980s and built her business through word of mouth. Customers came in for a gossip over a hot pie, sharing news about the village feat or the latest episode of EastEnders on the telly. As the morning wore on, the high street came alive. Dr. Ellis, the town GP, opened his surgery doors to a queue of patients. In those days, appointments were booked over the phone or in person, no online forms or apps. Mrs. Hargrove, an elderly widow, sat in the waiting room with a knitting magazine. She lived alone in a cottage on the outskirts, where winters felt long and quiet. Her days revolved around the radio for company, tuning into BBC Radio 4 for the news and weather. "No computers for me," she often said. "I prefer a good book by the fire." That afternoon, a light snow began to fall, dusting the rooftops and turning the fields white. In the local pub, the Red Lion, a group of farmers gathered around the bar. John Hartley, a sturdy man in his 50s, nursed a pint of ale. He farmed sheep on the hills nearby, and winter meant checking on the animals in the biting wind. No fancy forecasts online, he grumbled to his mate Bill. We watch the sky and feel the air. That's how it's always been. Bill laughed, wiping foam from his moustache. Remember last year? That storm caught us off guard. Had to round up the flock by torchlight. They swapped stories of past winters, from frozen pipes to village cricket matches in the summer. The pub was a hub. No one stared at screens. Instead, they played darts or dominoes, the crackle of the log fire adding warmth. Meanwhile, at the library, librarian Miss Clark helped a family choose books. The shelves were lined with paperbacks and encyclopedias, the go-to source for information. Young Emily, aged 10, borrowed a mystery novel. I want to know about dinosaurs, she said excitedly. Without Google, kids like her pored over heavy volumes or asked adults. Her dad, a mechanic, flipped through a car repair manual. Fixing engines without videos. It's all trial and error, he chuckled. As evening set in, the town quieted. Street lamps cast a golden glow on the snow-covered paths. Sarah returned home, lighting her gas fire and settling with a blanket. She opened her sister's letter, reading about life in the city, crowded tubes and bustling markets. No instant messages. The words on paper felt thoughtful, deliberate. In the Hargrove cottage, Mrs. Hargrove tuned her radio to a Christmas carol concert. The voices filled the room, chasing away the loneliness. Alex, after his shift, met friends at the chip shop for fish and chips wrapped in newspaper. They laughed about school, planning a snowball fight for the weekend. John and Bill lingered at the pub, discussing the millennium bug that had everyone worried at the start of the year. Computers crashing at midnight? What a fuss over nothing, John said. Little did they know how much would change in the coming years. That winter in Willowbrook captured the essence of life before the digital rush. People connected through shared moments, a chat over tea, a letter in the post, a game in the pub. The cold outside encouraged warmth inside, with stories told aloud and time savoured slowly. It was a simpler era, where the rhythm of daily life followed the seasons, not notifications. Now, let's take a quick, practical look at some useful vocabulary and cultural notes. Frost. Frost is the thin layer of ice you see on cold winter mornings, often on the ground, rooftops, or windows. It isn't heavy snow, and it isn't solid ice. It feels quiet and gentle, and that's why writers love using it. Example: the town was covered in frost. Novelty. A novelty is something that feels new and interesting simply because people are not used to it yet. The excitement usually comes from the newness, and it may not last forever. Example: at that time, the internet was still a novelty. Terraced house. A terraced house is a house that is joined to other houses in a row, sharing side walls. This is a very common type of home in Britain, especially in towns. Example: she lived in a small terraced house. Outskirts. The outskirts are the outer parts of a town or city away from the busy centre. These areas are usually quieter and more peaceful. Example: they lived on the outskirts of town. Nursed a drink. When someone nurses a drink, they drink it very slowly, often while talking or thinking. It suggests calmness and no hurry at all. Example: he nursed a pint of ale by the fire. Hub. A hub is a central place where people meet and where life happens. In many villages, the pub is the social hub. Example: the pub was the hub of the village. Chuckled. To chuckle means to laugh softly and quietly, not loudly. It's often used when something is mildly amusing. Example: he chuckled at the memory. Deliberate. Deliberate describes something done with care and intention, not by accident. It's often used for words, actions, or decisions. Example: her words were slow and deliberate. The pub as a social hub. In Britain, especially in small towns, the pub isn't just a place to drink. It's where people meet, talk, play games like darts, and catch up on local news. The pub works as a social hub, a place where everyday life and community come together. It's about connection, not alcohol. British humour. When John says, "What a fuss over nothing," we see very typical British humour. Instead of reacting dramatically, British people often use dry humour or understatement to deal with worries. It's a calm, slightly ironic way of responding to stress. The essence of life before the digital age. At its heart, the story shows how life felt before the digital rush. Days followed the seasons, not notifications, and people connected through simple shared moments. Life moved more slowly, and time felt more personal. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this part of life before the internet and picked up some useful English along the way. Take care, and I'll see you in the next part.